Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. Last show before Turkey Day, and as thanks, we have a special guest, Art Rondeau, who I think you've been on the show 3 billion times at this point, so you should all be familiar with him. One of our favorites. Art, say hey.
Hey, I appreciate that, Dre. I also appreciate the fact that you said this was because of Thanksgiving and not because of turkey. So.
Oh, that would have been better. We started over, Brian, and as always, we're produced by our own voice of God, man of many hats, Brian Foster. Say hey.
Oh, happy Thanksgiving, everyone. I am thankful you're both here to talk tonight, and thankful we have the NBA.
All right, and we'll make sure we repeat it at the end, but it's Art Rondeau. Sounds like Rondo, the player, but spelled Rondeau. So that's definitely fun. So check him out on Twitter, and we'll definitely plug that at the end. But we got some NBA to talk. So our topics are going to be the Kings can't even win right. Utah is just making Dre happy. The Cleveland Cavaliers were more messed up than we thought, and Brian's Warriors are in turmoil. That's right, Brian. I said turmoil. And then, of course, why would we have Art on if we weren't going to talk shooting? For those of you that don't know, Art is a NLP expert that teaches shooting, or among many of your other gifts. You actually have a ton of stuff. You know databases really well too, Art. But you are a great shooting coach. So, of course, we're going to talk shooting, particularly LeBron James, Markelle Fultz, Ben Simmons, and then Brian pulled an audible and added DeAndre Jordan. So a plethora to go. Let's hop right in. Actually, and Brian, I forgot this. This is our segment where I'm trying to do this regularly because we're getting engagement and we want to thank you for it. I want to do some around, or God, I should be reading off the script, Brian. I'm flying off the handle. But last week on Lost. So we actually do get some comments because we have been putting up regular content and people are actually responding. So we want to respond. And there was one really good one, Brian. So let me just make sure I get the right person. Jay Gunter Brett on last week's show. So we're going to go to last week's show where we forgot to talk about Carmelo Anthony, Brian. I loved it. Carmelo Anthony was one of the big topics on the script, and we ended up talking chess instead of talking Carmelo Anthony, which is fine. But just Jay Gunter Brett noted that in the NBA, of the players that are Brian Star, for those that don't remember using the wins produced formula, wins per 48, 200 means twice as good as an average player. There are 11 more bigs and 14 more last year, where meaning of the top players in the NBA, a bunch of them are bigs. And despite this lovable myth of small ball in the NBA, a bunch of the top players remain big players. And I think just a big part of it is two topics we're going to talk for sure, Art. Definitely some of them get dinged because they're bad at free throw shooting, and many of them end up on bad teams because of a flawed lottery system. So it's not that bigs are dying in the NBA or the modern NBA is losing the traditional big. It's that bigs end up on bad teams and people just don't realize how many good players in the NBA are bigs. And both Art and Brian were polite, so neither one of them took the ball. So Brian, any thoughts on that?
No, I was just trying to bring up what he said here. And yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't get a chance to read this before the show, but it does seem like there's a lot of good bigs out there. Sorry, Dre, I don't have a lot here.
Okay, at a point, we talked Butler, the Butler debacle on Minnesota last week as well. And the simple note that we brought up is that the real problem was Andrew Wiggins, and had that team dumped Andrew Wiggins, there could have been something special. Losing Butler, though, they might get better in the short run because they got two good players and they have no depth, but we'll see. So Jay Gunter Brett brought that up. Last comment I want to give is to rebound and threes, and actually I'll throw this out to both Brian. I'll throw it out to Art then. Kyle Kuzma, he might actually be hurting the Lakers. The Lakers have a lot of talented veterans now. This is, unfortunately, he broke his hand, but before he broke his hand, Rondeau, because, Rondeau is awesome always. Rondeau was playing well. Lance Stephenson's playing the best he has in years, maybe playing next to LeBron James' help. Obviously, LeBron James is still LeBron James, and Tyson Chandler was a fantastic pickup. Kyle Kuzma is one of their younger players that had a really hot start last year, but is just not really living up to the hype at this point and could be weighing them down. So do you have any thoughts on Kyle Kuzma in Los Angeles? You're out in California, so do you get a chance to see him play?
I am. I've seen a couple of the Lakers games broadcast. And here's the thing about the difference with Kyle this year versus last year. Last year, it was kind of open. He was able to do more of what he wanted in a sense. Now there are people that are in, maybe taking up some of the spaces that he's more used to. I'm not saying that is exactly the case because I haven't seen enough of the games and him in those games to say for certain. But I'm thinking back to Landry Fields actually, who was lighting it up for the Knicks until Carmelo got traded there, and Carmelo took up a lot of the real estate that Landry had been playing out of his mind from, and that caused Landry to decline significantly. And
just to throw in, because I always like defending Landry Fields, then unfortunately he got injured, and so even after he got traded, one of our boys, Masai Ujiri, I believe, picked him up at some point. He never got to prove what he was worth even on a better team, because essentially Melo made him look bad in New York. I'm okay blaming Melo for everything. And then
kick him while he's down, Andre.
Then he got injured, and so no one else could see it. And it makes me sad, because it's like if Landry Fields had stayed healthy, I think he could have been something special.
Well, let me throw an asterisk out on that. One of the things I found interesting, because when somebody is playing well and all of a sudden they're not, unless there is something physical that you can point to, lack of sleep, nutritional issues, sprains, strains, whatever, then usually it's something mental, and it is usually is very easy to fix, or at least if you've got the training that I'm fortunate enough to have. Okay, so one of my big issues with a lot of athletes across sports is if somebody's all of a sudden not playing well and there's no physical cause, don't mess with whatever it is they're doing physically, because you can hurt them. And Landry ended up changing his shot, and right after that got injured. Now, here's a guy who had played and shot the ball a certain way for years, many years, and did it well enough to get into the NBA with it and play well as a second-round pick for quite a long period of time there during that season. But he changes the way he shoots and all of a sudden has an injury. Now, there may be no connection. I don't know Landry, and so I wasn't there to see it. But right after that, Landry was very frank in an interview and said that he thought that his problems in New York stemmed because of like confidence, and I may be putting the wrong words out here, but basically there were mental types of issues and uncertainty about where should I be standing in relation to Carmelo and da 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 da. So all things that were mental, but he went and he changed something physical, which was his shot, and ended up with an injury. So really, make sure people look at film and they'll say, "Oh, I can see what your problem is," and if somebody's tense, let's say, well, what happens is that the blood chemistry changes to tense, and there are actually different levels of different chemicals. Their muscles get tense on top of it. Well, if they're feeling tense and their muscles are tense, then they're not going to say extend their arm as fluidly on a release, jump shot release. Okay. Well, you can point to that, you can see it, but it's not really the problem. That's the symptom of the problem. The symptom is that they're tense, and that's restricting their fluidity. So, just for people who are listening in, if there's no physical cause to point to, then maybe take a look and just see, is there something you can do to bolster your confidence or to stop thinking so much when you are, about to do what you're going to do, take a putt in golf or take a free throw or whatever. So, okay.
And I want to shout out, you got involved in this conversation, Art. As you know, Brian, we always end up on a tangent. So here's our first one of the show, Brian. But I was talking with Travis Heath. So he's Dr. Travis Heath. He's a doctor of psychology and, has done some coaching work in the NBA. And much like you, Art, I look and I go, wow, this person coached in the NBA and the teams did not keep him around, which I view as a mistake. And that makes me, instead of me going, man, I want to go to Sloan and get a front office job, I go, man, if the front offices aren't smart enough to realize how lucky they were to have people like you are, the Knicks, obviously, and then Travis Heath, I believe he worked for the Minnesota Timberwolves, which is the Knicks win outright in dysfunctional franchise since James Dolan took over in 1999. Because the Clippers at least had a couple of good years, right? I think the Knicks win the 2-decade mark, right? The last 2 decades, the Knicks have to be the worst run franchise. I think the Timberwolves are a close second, and then the Clippers are after that. So,
sure. You know why the Wolves beat the Knicks there is because both last 2 seasons, when it's come down to who's going to get more ping pong balls, the Wolves have beaten the Knicks twice, or lost to the Knicks twice. Well, they lost 1 game to them that put them in a better position, and then they had a tie the other year and won the flip of the coin. So anyway, so the Wolves are a little bit luckier, shall we say, than the Knicks.
Oh, well, okay. I don't want to go off on tangent number 2, but I'll say Travis Heath was noting actually about Nikola Jokic and said Nikola Jokic just got this huge contract extension, which was rightly deserved, and has said his mentality is such that he's not necessarily the most aggressive personality. So he is now the star on the team, but there was a difference between you're a 2nd-round pick that's coming off the bench, and now you are the guy on the team getting the money, getting the all-star nods, getting the MVP considerations by the beat writers. And he basically said before the season, he said, I think it's going to take him a while to adapt to that change. And I was talking back and forth with him, and I know you hopped in a few times, about how bizarre it is that teams, like you're saying, they spend so much focus on physical, right? Proper conditioning, proper drugs, all this, but not spending even a fractional amount into thinking about dealing with the psychology of their players. And I know there are like sports psychologists, which is what it is, but it's funny because I'm not talking about like overall you have a major problem. It's kind of what you were saying, like these minor things that might affect you, and then noticing them ahead of time and going, like you were saying with Landry Fields. Landry Fields is playing amazing, and we're going to hire a new guy. That's going to affect his role. How are we going to adjust so that he is comfortable with it? And I think I said to Brian a few weeks ago, Art, that I could give a damn about a lot of analytics in the NBA because I candidly think, and I hate to give away our secret sauce, and if you go to the Boxscore Geeks, I think you could sort by wins per 48. I think you could throw a dart at players you think are available, and you could construct a team that way, and you'd be okay. From what people hire analytics in the NBA for currently. Because I think the state of numerical analytics in the NBA is such that is a winning strategy at the moment. All these people with the new analytics, I don't buy it. Where I think teams need to focus their energy and effort, but they don't, is how am I able to get this information to the players in a way that they will effectively do it? That was a huge part of Moneyball. Was Billy Beane was a former player who said, I'm going to have to ask star players that love stealing bases and swinging for the fences. I'm going to have to ask them to walk. I'm going to have to ask them to not steal bases. How do I tell them to do that without it mucking up their game? And that was one of the secret sauces of Moneyball. There has not been the focus on the NBA for that. And like I said, that is where I would put my money if I was able to.
I think that's a great point. And, if you look back at Memphis a few years ago, they got John Hollinger, okay, stats guy, obviously. And they, he got into an argument with their head coach, was it Lionel Hollins? And it had to do, I think, with him approaching a player or something like that. And Lionel Hollins didn't like that. And it's probably not a good idea to be barking at your boss or that type of thing. But it is something you have to be aware of. You have to know how to put the information out there without doing it in a way that you're actually making things worse. If you say to a player, hey, we got stats here that show that you never play well in, the Staples Center, and they're going to the Staples Center. Well, you pretty much just programmed them to have a bad night. Now, so you want to, if you see something like that, maybe you go to the coach instead and say, hey, listen, this guy doesn't normally do well at Staples. Maybe you can run a couple of easy plays for him early to get him going. And the player doesn't even know about it, but the coach does and the analytics guy does. So, and then sometimes it's going to be, Kobe Bryant was real good about listening to analytics guys and doing stuff on that. But but Kobe kind of is a different beast as far as, what he was willing to do to improve his game. Most people aren't doing that type of thing. And, if you got somebody with a hard shell, you can hit them with a fact a lot easier maybe than if somebody's a little more on the, handle with care type of thing. You can't just go and blurt something out about, oh, you're always bad in this situation, because then it's going to happen. So,
and I'll finish this tangent just with one of my favorite anecdotes that I've heard, which is, so Dan Ariely, one of my favorite behavioral psychologists, I think has mentioned this. I don't think it's his research, but he's noted this point. You have someone take a test, and before the test, occasionally they have you fill out surveys for demographic data. So things that say, I'm a woman, I'm, this age to this age, I'm this ethnicity, etc. Well, people will do worse if you remind them of things that have negative stereotypes against them. So if you remind someone of their gender before a math test, they will do worse if they are a female, usually. And it's not and I want to make this clear. This is not a gender thing saying women are worse at math. Quite the contrary. I'm saying there is a stigma out there in the United States in particular that says women are worse in math. And there's lots of studies that say at the very, very top level, irrespective of age, other countries that don't do stupid tests like that, fine, you can get top from both, right? So
sure.
I'm picking that to the curve immediately. I don't want that point out there, but it's saying if you remind someone of a negative stereotype, they'll do worse in there. Same thing, getting onto sports with jumping. You do the same thing. You tell people, hey, you're African American, hey, you're white before a physical test, they'll do better or worse. And it's purely psychological because you take away that reminder and they do better. And sure. So I think what you're saying is funny is us analytics people, we think we have the data. So all you do is I just give the data in a spreadsheet to the person directly. And what we don't realize is that spreadsheet, instead of saying, here's what you need to improve, or here's what you're good at, what it's really saying is, I love the term you use, Art. You may have just failed the Turing test yourself, but you're programming your athlete. It's funny to think that analytics people don't think that having the correct data may not solve the problem, because what you're really doing is misprogramming the person instead of programming them.
Right. Could I throw one thing in on the end of this? I apologize for jumping on your tangent of the tangent, but I'll give you an example of something I actually had to fix with somebody. He was shooting before a game, okay, and his wife was there, and the guy's making a lot of shots, and his wife says to him, "Did I remember to turn off the stove before we left?" Well, he doesn't know. If she said, "Did you turn off the stove?" He'd know, I did or I didn't. He has no idea. So now he's uncertain. And he starts taking shots with uncertainty, as opposed to the confidence that he had built up after burying a bunch of shots, starts missing all kinds of shots because what's in his mind is making him uncertain. So one of the things that I'm able to do with athletes is get them to think back to a time when they were confident. Might not even be a game that they played. It could be confident because they asked out this girl and she said yes, or something. They took a test and it went well. But you get that into their head and then get them to perform, and they will perform like what you've put into their head.
Well, it's funny. I know, as an interesting just analog, I know there are definitely the LeBron James Madison Square Garden games. And then I know also I think Rondeau nationally televised games, the same thing. It's funny. I think it builds on itself, because I think what happens is I think LeBron James early in his career had one or two good Madison Square Garden games. It turned into a rumor on the internet. And then you've got the announcers, the coaches, the pre-press interviews. They say, you always do well in Madison Square Garden. And
there you go. Yep.
And I'll throw out a book for people. And by the way, I don't feel bad missing some of the NBA topics to pick your brain on this, Art, because why have you on the show to just talk like the daily blotter that most NBA podcasts will have? I much prefer this information.
Thanks.
So sorry, Brian, if I'm making that audible call. But what I'll say is there's a great book called Dunk Tank Pink that talks about these tiny little things that just can mess with your psychology. The reason it's called Dunk Tank Pink, there was a team that painted their wall pink, and of the visitors' locker room. And it's called Dunk Tank Pink because there were police stations that discovered this too. For whatever reason, this shade of color, this shade of pink, seemed to make people more passive, because they associate. I think they associated it with passivity, cultural.
Sure.
Yep.
Yep.
They associate it with passivity. That gets primed in their head, and then they play in sports. They play less aggressive, and then in prison, in the dunk tank, they are less aggressive. So basically, it's funny because you're actually breaking down what it is. It's saying this is associated with passivity. I'm going to prime you with the idea of passivity. You are going to be more passive. Humans are much more susceptible to small things like this than we'd like. And all of the research seems to, the reason I'm not like scoffing at you, Art, when you're saying this is I'm like, yeah, all the research seems to agree with this. And so it is amusing how far we've gotten on supercomputers and AI and stuff like that in front offices. And the fact that the research like this, like I'm bringing up pop psychology. I'm bringing up things from books that are 10, 20 years old at this point.
Yeah.
And NBA front offices haven't necessarily caught up to that yet. And I'm not holding my breath anytime soon.
Good idea.
All right. So actually, this one does relate to another one of your topics, Art, because you are definitely interested in improving the NBA draft if we are forced to keep the NBA draft. So
yes,
as I mentioned on this show, our thought is the draft is stupid. We'd abolish it, but we also accept that the odds. It's very similar to like saying, can we impeach Trump? You'd have to get a 52% Republican Congress to agree to that, and they are never. You have to get 25% of that Congress to agree. That is never going to happen. So why?
Hate to say it, Jay, impeachment's even more than a 50% vote in the Senate, but your point still stands.
I'm saying 52. I can't. You got me off on this tangent, Brian. So we're going to address it because I don't want my math skills impugned. I'm saying 52% of Congress is of the Senate is Republican. You would need to get a certain portion of them to agree because you could assume all of the Democrats would vote. So that was all
I see. That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, but so the same thing. You'd have to get a huge number of GMs and the commissioner to agree to get rid of the draft, and that's just not happening.
Not going to happen, right?
Okay.
But so the reason this relates is the Kings, Brian. The Kings are up there with Memphis. De'Aaron Fox is playing amazingly. Can you throw out some other players that are doing well? Because I've not looked at them recently. So the Kings are doing great.
Bielitsa, who we've been talking about, 30 years old, came over from the 76ers, playing great for them.
Who else? What else we got?
Let's see. Let's bring him up here. Let's bring him up. Let's bring up the team page on the good old boxscoregeeks.com.
Buddy Hield is a good player. Bielitsa is above that. I mean,
he's probably fawned out a little bit.
Basically, what happened is you have some good players that are playing all right. We've liked Willie Cauley-Stein. Really, there was just a huge jump in De'Aaron Fox. So this team is playing great.
That's the big one. And it's worth pointing out, Dre, I want to say their Pythagorean is a little bit worse than their record as well.
So, but then that could also mean they're maybe a little more clutch.
They're a little bit lucky, yeah.
So maybe that goes to the coach. Maybe Dave Yorger is that how you say it?
Jaeger,
like Jaeger bomb. Perfect.
Exactly.
Maybe Dave Jaeger is doing a great job coaching this team. And apparently the Kings front office, let me remind you of some of the Kings' best hits. The Kings basically went up to Sam Hinkie back when Sam Hinkie was a GM and said, would you like 2 free second-round draft picks? And Sam Hinkie said, of course, would you also like to take some bad players in return for them? And they said yes. That's one of their best hits. They had, regardless of what we think of him, they had a top superstar center in the league, DeMarcus Cousins, that they traded for what we thought was a horrible trade. And we're, as you can see, DeMarcus Cousins haters, I guess. They made a trade where we said, wow, the other team won that trade. And then after that trade, the general manager, Vlade Divac, is that how you say it?
Divac.
Yeah.
Divac. Thank you. I always mess up that Z at the end of international names. Divac came out and said, we had better trade offers on the table, but we were just kind of getting frustrated. And so we just decided to make a bad trade, which is exactly what a general manager should go on the record as saying. This front office is apparently feuding with a coach that has a team we thought was bad overperforming. So that's definitely amusing.
Yes. Well, see, here's the thing about that. And it was a really good point. And I was glad Brian brought it up for me to take a look at. They're 9-8 right now. And now, certainly, the front office has spent a lot of money on a bunch of guys that aren't getting a lot of minutes. Usually, the front office likes, when they do something, they want to see, we're investing this money, we want to see these guys on the court. At the same time, Jaeger is playing more experienced players, veterans, and these other guys that have just been signed to a lot of money are, getting maybe 10, 12 minutes a game. And they're winning. Now, the article that I read, Brian pointed me to, was said something about the fact that management has said that they see this as a rebuilding year. So rebuilding year usually means we want to get a really good lottery pick for whatever reason, okay? And something that Andres and I have talked about numerous times, and if we're going to keep the draft, then I think this is a way to go. Right now, you get ping pong balls. Basically, you're rewarded for sucking. Okay, the worse you are, the more ping pong balls you're going to get. Okay, well, so you put a bad product on the floor. That means that fewer people show up at the games. That means less money in parking, less money in tickets, less money in, concessions, all kinds of stuff. And it's a bad product. You're teaching ball players how to play badly, which is not a good thing. So what we've discussed is what would happen if we used analytics, because now we have a lot of advanced analytics that we could do this with, and we might need to come up with some more. But what if we said, instead of giving you a ping pong ball for playing badly, we're going to give you a ping pong ball for playing above your head. So if there was a system, let's say, that ranked teams based on 100, just, 100's the top, pardon me, and you got a team that's at 70, when you look at their players, who's not injured and who's doing what, and that team plays at a 78 level for a game, maybe against a really top contender, they're supposed to lose by 20 and they lose by 6. Maybe you give them a ping pong ball for that. If they win, actually upset them, maybe you give them 2 ping pong balls. And so what happens is you've still got a team that maybe is not truly NBA elite level, but you're getting better play out of them. You're getting something better to watch. People are going to show up. There's a whole bunch of things around that, monetarily as well, which obviously is a big deal in the NBA. And but you're going to see better ball. And so what I've been pushing for, I've got an article on my blog that talks about how to go about this. Now, I'm not the analytics expert. Andres is the analytics expert there. So, that's why we've kind of been discussing this, what could happen. And we're maybe hoping to see if we can get a school interested in, that's got an advanced analytics program that could start doing some work on this. But ultimately, it leaves the lottery in place, which is what the NBA seems to want. And it gives you a way to get ping pong balls other than playing so badly that, people's eyes are bleeding when they watch you. So there's my little song of dance.
And what I'll say, just to point out to the Kings, we have, and this is rehashing a lot of points, we have basically said we do not see tanking as a viable strategy, and what we mean by that is the Hinkie model. We don't like the idea of giving up a season before it started, especially when you have a chance. The weird thing is, we've noted, and you are utterly familiar with this point, Art, if you have a star player, even if you're a mediocre team, you have a shot in the playoffs. The reason I bring this up is you were around the Knicks. You have some great behind-the-scenes story. I mean, at this point, a book on that, like go talk to Jeff Pearlman or something, on your time with the Knicks in the late 90s, right as I just dropped his name, but the worst owner ever, who I was talking to.
Jim Dolan.
Jim Dolan. I can't believe I dropped his name because I said it like 20 times before the show started. Right as James Dolan was taking over the Knicks, when they made the finals, because Marcus Camby broke out of his shell, when Allen Houston did actually turn into a good player for 30 games, the only good games of his entire career, which we've written about because Art was there for all of that, they basically said, we have a star, Marcus Camby, we have a mediocre team, and enough things break the right way in the playoffs that they made it to the finals. That happened. The Kings right now have a star player in De'Aaron Fox, which is remarkable. They actually have a good playoff rotation. Yelica, I think, right, Brian?
Bielitsa.
I'll get it.
He's their starting power forward now. Well, so Dre, I can give you, before you finish that thought, here's some details on what's going on. This is an article from Chris Haynes on Yahoo Sports. The title is Sources Disagreement Over Kings Direction Could Lead to Dave Yeager's Dismissal. They're upset that they're not playing the second overall pick, Marvin Bagley III, more, as well as forwards Harry Giles and Skal Labissiere. Might be pronouncing that wrong. And instead they're playing Bielitsa, who is 30 Yeah, so that's what's going on, and he's gotten the dreaded vote of confidence from GM Vlade Divac. And then here's my favorite part of the story. Kings fans gave Dave Yeager a standing ovation after hot seat rumors. The Kings fans know tanking is not what's up. Good job on them. So that's the details on the Kings.
So here's what we got. We got De'Aaron Fox, who's just about star level as a sophomore, doing great in the NBA. Their playoff rotation at this point, if we just went by minutes playing, would be De'Aaron Fox, star level, Buddy Hield, good player, Willie Cauley-Stein, above average big, Bielitsa, above average, power forward big, which is good, Marvin Bagley, who is not good. I'll have a point on that in a second, and Iman Shumpert. So those players are playing good. That's a good playoff rotation with a star, which means you have a shot in the playoffs. So we would never, ever, ever say to give that up ahead of time, because making the playoffs and having an outside shot, New York Knicks 1999 style, trumps anything else, especially because, as we've noted, one round of the playoffs can pay for you to buy a draft pick in the first round, and a decent analytics squad can get you an underrated one. I mean, it's worth noting in the East this season, Kyle Lowry, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jimmy Butler are like three of the big names on three teams expected to win the East. And they were picked respectively like end of the first round, 15th and 30th in the first round. So I don't ever buy it. Now, the funny thing that you're bringing up, Art, to what you were saying about your idea is, as soon if this team was over, if the Sacramento Kings had a 20-35 record, and it's the All-Star break, and they know that they're 15 games out, because the West is looking really strong this year. So it's entirely it's remarkable to me. I think I tweeted out a few days ago. I don't know how true it remains, Brian, but in the West, the worst team, if you remove the Suns, is 4.5 games back from the top team out West. Whereas out East, the second worst team, the Atlanta Hawks, was 4.5 games out of the playoffs. So the West is currently still just remarkable looking, and there's a lot of good narratives out there. But if they're out of the playoffs there, I don't see the problem of giving up the season, and that's what we don't want. We want there to be incentive to say, try to win games, try to play good players, as opposed to incentive to say, shut down your good players. You don't want them to get injured. You want them healthy for next year. You want to be able to trade them, because that happened this last year. I'm forgetting, it was Mirotic and one other. I think it was Tyreek Evans and Nikola Mirotic. And I can't fault this strategy. Their respective teams shut them down right before the All-Star break, because they said they're on the trading block. The trade deadline's coming up. If we play them before the All-Star break and they get injured and can't pass their physicals, we can't trade them. And then, of course, by the time they can pass their physical, the All-Star break is over. So we can't do that. And so exactly what you're saying, if there was incentive at that point in the season to say, if we play these guys and lose by 5 instead of losing by 10, we get an extra lottery ball. Or if we play these guys and win, we have a better lottery shot. Then they're going to be saying that, as opposed to what they were saying, which is, if we play these guys and win, well, they might get injured and we lose lottery balls. Why is there incentive to do that? And so we absolutely hate that, and that is a bad incentive. So we would love to see that fixed. But right now for the Kings, with them winning and having a playoff shot with an outside shot to upset, the example I'll give a few years ago, the Los Angeles Clippers with Chris Paul, a great team. Chris Paul gets injured in the first round. The Portland Trail Blazers, a lower-rated seed, managed to make it to the second round. So the Kings are in that spot right now, so they should never give up that position. The front office is wrong currently, but if they start thinking that way in the future, we would like to see something that changed that incentive.
Agreed.
All right, Brian.
One last thing on that, Dre. Everything you guys said is right. That would be better, and it would be a good way to incentivize these teams. But they should, even right now, it's already better not to tank. So we're just giving them a what do you want to call a life raft, or I don't know what the great example is. They should already know this. That's all.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that they don't. If you have a playoff team after 20 games in the NBA season, you don't think to yourself, how can I make the playoffs? You should start thinking about, okay, what are the top teams in the NBA? How could I shock them, right? How could I steal a game or two from them? That's what you should be thinking right now, not, man, I was expecting to be in the draft lottery. And then Marvin Bagley, last point there, to just training players. We have hated this idea of putting the focus of the team on young players before they're ready. We love the idea of slowly ramping them up. And some of the greatest in NBA history, that some of the players I brought up, Kobe Bryant, of all people, under Phil Jackson. Kobe Bryant, Dirk Nowitzki, actually, Kawhi Leonard. These are finals MVP players were brought up slowly on their team and then put into the starting role as opposed to being given the reins immediately. We don't see why more teams don't do that.
Yeah. So for these next two topics of mine, Dre, do you want me to do lightning round so we can get to shooting, or what do you think?
Yeah, why don't you lightning round Utah and the Cleveland Cavaliers one? I'll let our last thought on both of them. And then I do want to talk Kevin Durant, and then we'll get into the big one.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, just real fast, here's a couple of other things going on. So we haven't got to talk about Utah too much yet. They're not playing very well, so we're going to, you'll have a lot to say on Mitchell in the future, but I just wanted to have one brief detail on them before we talk about them more in future shows. But so Andrew Bailey at SLC Dunk, the SB Nation webpage for the Jazz, said they need to shake up the starting lineup. They need to change, and basically his suggestions involve benching Derek Favors and benching Ricky Rubio and bringing in some other players, right? So, man, he's just not looking at the numbers. Favors and Gobert are carrying the Jazz all on their own. Rubio's not playing well, but he's been good in the past. I wouldn't give up on him, especially considering their options, which are like Exum, not great there. So, yeah, I just think that, Dre, you are right on here about the Jazz. It's their smalls that are the problem, including that Donovan Mitchell game you put in your top 5 box scores where he had 0 assists with all those shots. The other smalls are not playing great either. Even Joe Ingles he'll probably catch back up, though. So, yeah, that's it on the Jazz. Their bigs are the only thing they have right now. You should not bench them.
Well, and you're familiar with this art of you mentioned what Carmelo Anthony did to a very fluid, awesome-looking offense in New York. If you have a black hole on your offense, which Donovan Mitchell is, it can disrupt a great playmaker like Rubio, and it can disrupt a great outside shooter like Joe Ingles, who's basically saying, I'm going to get open and just, be ready to give me the ball. So, I mean, I am comfortable saying, for whatever reason, Donovan Mitchell has in his mind that he has to be the guy on the team and take all the shots, and he's taking more shots last year than he did. He's taking more shots this year than he did last year, and that is really mucking up their offense, which just needs to be average for that to be a good team. So I'm loving it at the moment in a Schadenfreude way. Do you have any comments on that?
I think that's a great point. And, I don't know what's up with Ricky Rubio because, he's not shooting well. He hasn't shot well at times in the past, but then also every now and then he catches fire. So, I'd really love to investigate that and see what's going on and how could we make him shoot well all the time. But I think one of the things is this: if you've got a guy who's a black hole, particularly if he's at the guard position. I mean, talking Donovan Mitchell. I mean, did he have 35 shots the other night with no assists or something like?
As Brian mentions on our top 5 box scores of the week or bottom 3, he made it because he missed 22. He missed 22 shots and 10 3-pointers in that game. So
well, that takes effort. I mean, so you got to give him that. But here's the thing. I guess, and because you mentioned Carmelo earlier as well, I think one of the things that you really need, and maybe Ricky's got to either be crowned by the front office, or he's just got to take over. But you really need a floor general, somebody that commands the ball. And then if Mitchell's going to take 25 shots, that's fine, but it should be within the flow of the offense with Rubio running things, getting other people involved so that Mitchell's shots are better. So it's not just Mitchell's got the ball and everybody knows he's going to, shoot, and so they go and double team him. Back when Carmelo was playing with the Knicks, one of the things that was a problem was a lot of guys that played point guard, they thought their job was to dribble the ball up and give it to Melo. And that's not what was needed. And when Jason Kidd was there, and he's at the time was on the downside of his career. I mean, he was just about to retire. But Jason Kidd is somebody, he says, give me the ball, you give him the ball, just out of respect. And that was the kind of point guard that Carmelo needed. And, Jason Kidd ran the offense. And they had some of their, that's when they went to the playoffs. One of the few times they've gone to the playoffs in the last 20 years. So, I think that you need somebody running the team from the floor. And since Donovan Mitchell's not looking to get assists and he's showing a little bit of, of black holishness here, then it's got to be Ricky Rubio, or they've got to get somebody else. But somebody that people are going to give the ball to, and that guy is going to run the offense. That's my take. Anyway.
And actually, Brian, I'm okay just dropping the last two and just saying we can laugh at these as the Cleveland Cavaliers. Apparently, they the article you're saying from Real GM says that they lied about trading Kyrie Irving, which led to the end of LeBron James in Cleveland. I think he was out regardless, but that's a fun narrative. And then obviously there is more drama with Kevin Durant on the Warriors. But you know what the good news is, Brian? This story ain't going anywhere, so I'm sure we'll be able to talk more Kevin Durant and Draymond Green.
Yeah, and just real fast, Dre, there's another great article this week that I forgot to put in the script from Hoops Hype by Alex Kennedy, who's done stuff like this in the past where he goes and interviews a ton of players. And this one's called NBA Players Discuss the Dark Side of Free Agency. And there's and also in that title, quote, I wanted to quit. That's how bad the free agency went for this one anonymous player. But there's all kinds of stories in here that are similar to that of just teams lying to a player and then just doing the opposite like a few minutes later. It's just crazy. That's all I got to say about that.
And as we were noting at the beginning of the show, Art, that is a perfect way to misprogram a perfectly good player.
Absolutely.
All right. This is a subject you wanted to talk. So LeBron James in this season's been a little amusing. Actually, do you have any comments on, I believe earlier in the season, he's ultra clutch. He gets, I believe it's against the Spurs. He gets the game to overtime. Now, admittedly, it's because he wanted to call a timeout. A timeout wasn't called. He said, F it, and took a three, and it went in. So admittedly, the game should have been over at that point. But LeBron's LeBron, goes to overtime. Oh, my goodness, it looks like they might have it. LeBron James gets to the line, misses two clutch free throws. They lose, I think, by one in overtime.
Right.
So there's the anti-clutch LeBron narrative, and there's this one that you brought up, which is to pass Wilt Chamberlain's scoring record. He goes to the line, I think, with 1 or 2 minutes left in the game, and makes a clutch free throw. And you said you had some thoughts on LeBron James's free throw shooting this season.
Sure. So there's two things. LeBron has said that his problem is mental. Okay, he was quoted as saying that. So since LeBron has said that, I'm going to say there's a mental component, but I don't think it means that he's choking. I think it could be that he's just thinking about him too much at the end. Oh, here we go. Now it's, maybe he's hearing the voices from the stands a little more than he would earlier in the game. But that, I believe, is because he hasn't known what the real problem is. The real problem for LeBron and the real problem for most missed free throws, actually, I've seen this over the years, over decades, has to do with a center of gravity issue that when the player starts to lose balance, the body doesn't want it to fall over, so it tries to keep them from losing balance, and it starts this whole chain of events that ultimately ends in a missed free throw. But everybody thinks the missed free throw is the problem, and it's actually a symptom of the problem. Okay, now he missed two in the game that he passed Wilt. He only missed 2 free throws, I believe, and those 2 were at the end of the first half. Well, why would missing at the end of a half or at the end of a game be something other than mental, like a choke type of thing? Well, because people are tired. LeBron plays a ton of minutes. Muscles get tired. The muscles that hold us upright get a little tired, not enough so that, the guy sitting on the floor collapsed, but it just has to be, enough off so that the body loses balance when it wouldn't ordinarily lose balance. Okay, so he misses a couple at the end of the first quarter, but makes all of them in the second quarter, including, we called the one where he passed Wilt as clutch because that's a high pressure situation. I mean, everybody knows he was going to pass Wilt either that game or the next game, but here he is at the line in a situation where he has just recently said, my head's messing me up on this, and he goes and carefully sinks the free throw. And we should. I do want to make one thing absolutely clear about LeBron James, that he's given away in interviews and other things we've noticed, including an article I wrote where I said my belief is LeBron James' current motivation for the remainder of his NBA career is to end his career atop the all-time points leading category. And he wants to do it in a Lakers jersey because to get there requires passing 3 Laker greats, one of which he already has, Wilt, as well as 4 total players that played for the Lakers. Karl Malone did as well. And what I'll say is, one, the giveaways, like I've mentioned, are one,
last season he had this garbage game where he didn't need to play, but he played because it was the 82nd game of the season. He wanted to play all 82. And then he had a record against Michael Jordan of 10-point games, wherein he stayed in long enough to get to 10 points and then checked out. So he our point is, for these athletes that say, I don't care about the records, I don't know about the blah, we know LeBron knows that. And then I believe last year there was an interview where someone asked him about a play, and there's no such thing as eidetic memory, but there are people that have domain-specific knowledge such that they are able to encode a tremendous amount of data, and LeBron James with basketball is one of them. It's not surprising given how good he is, because he was able to start rattling off, on this play, I was here, this guy was here, this is what happened, then this happened, then this happened, and he just gave himself away. So when LeBron James is at the line getting ready to pass Wilt's record, on the one hand, you could have someone naively say, I don't think LeBron James realized that point was going to get him the record, whereas observing him and the things he's done, damn well in his head he knew exactly what was going on.
Absolutely. And even if, the funny thing is, even if he didn't, you can bet the crowd was letting him know. So, so definitely there were cues there. So, we've got a clip. I don't know, Brian, are you going to be playing this clip or putting it out on the site or what? But it shows the LeBron free throws from the end of that game where he passed Wilt.
Yeah, we've just been showing them. I did forget to share my screen with you guys, but yeah, we've been showing them for the viewers.
That's great. So here's the thing that you can see. I talk about balance being an issue. Well, what you can see in LeBron's doing is he's stepping over the line. It's because he's lost balance. Okay. Now, here's the funny thing about it. I said, losing your balance isn't what causes you to miss the free throw. It's trying to stop from losing your balance that is what causes the missed free throw. He's not trying to stop. He's stepping over the line. He's clearly lost balance and gone over. He used to do this when he was with Miami as well. Now, I don't recall many of his free throws earlier in the season, but I'm pretty sure this is stepping over now as much as he's doing is more recent over the last few games as opposed to from the beginning of the year. So, here's the thing. He loses balance, but doesn't try to stop it, and he's able to make the shot. He's making a lot of them by stepping over the line. The problem for him is that he's close to violating the NBA's rule on crossing the free throw line. And if he keeps doing this for the entire season, and then he gets to the playoffs, and the coach of their opponent says, hey, ref, he's violating this. Now he's going to have to change the way he shoots free throws during the playoffs, and that's not going to be a good situation.
And we've seen that before, right? Coaches have kept stuff like that in their back pocket until the playoffs, until some big time. I want to say it happens more in the NFL, but or say hockey. Right. They're in hockey. They do like stick checks and equipment checks at strategic times.
Yep, absolutely. And in fact, the year that I first saw him do that with the Heat, somebody called him on it. One of the coaches during a regular season game, and my first comment, I was watching the game with a friend, and I said, boy, that was stupid, because that was a piece of information they should have held on to until the playoffs, because the coach of the other team, they weren't in danger. It's not like they were either going to make the playoffs or not based on that game. They were already in the playoffs, end of story. So my guess is that's coming, assuming the Lakers make the playoffs, and I think they will. So he needs to get that thing fixed. Hey, I'm only up the 101 by 45 minutes. So LeBron, I'm on my way.
There we go.
Just as a capper on that point before we get to Fultz, this is a fascinating point that I think you and I have talked before, Art, where it is so hard for people to want to focus on things like free throws. It's one of the sticks in my craw. It's what I gave the talk at the Great Lakes Analytics Sports Conference, where I'm going, this is such an easy place to focus. And LeBron James is an amazing player, and he is an above average free throw shooter. But, at 74% free throw shooting for his career, this is an area where if he improved it marginally would have huge dividends, but a lot of teams will say, we're not worried about it because he's above average. And the funny thing is, from the weird analytics perspective, we go, it doesn't matter, where you're getting the wins from, where you're getting extra points from doesn't matter. So I don't care if you have the greatest player in the world who is above average at free throws. If there is a way to make him even better at it, there's no reason you shouldn't take it, especially if it's pretty simple.
Can I say one more thing on LeBron, Dre? Just real fast. So I just wanted to pick up on your point. You said he passed the 3 Laker greats to get that scoring title, right? He just passed Wilt. He still has Abdul-Jabbar number 1 and Kobe Bryant number 3. And you also mentioned Carmelo number 2. I don't want to forget who's number 4 on that list. Michael Jordan. He wants to pass Michael Jordan.
By the way, I tweeted this out because I was counting it. If he keeps up his scoring, which was about 27, and by the way, it's
that was a great point.
He will pass Michael Jordan's record. I forget which game number. It's a game against the Bulls this season. So
yeah, that was a great find on your part.
If he keeps that up, that would happen. So that'd be interesting.
Sure. Could I? I'm going to jump in again here. I apologize, Trey. So because you're talking about even fixing a great or improving a great free throw shooter. Okay, I work with Allen Houston 99-2000. Okay, we have. He sets all kinds of records, personal records for that. And Dre, you've done a really awesome analytics study on that. And I never messed with his free throws because even though I'd worked with Chris Dudley, and that's why I had met Allen, because he was an 86% free throw shooter, 83.7, I think, actually, up to that point through those 7 seasons. But he started to miss at the end of games. And they started to say he was choking. Well, I'm working with his head, so I know he's not choking. So I know the whole thing about the balance, yada, yada, yada. I go out to New York. I show him this exercise. And now here's a guy that was 83.7. So that's, better than a lot of free throw shooters in the league. Okay. During the first 7 years, his best of his career, up to the point where I worked with him, his best season ever was an 86.2 from the line. His career is 86.3. Every year after that, he went up from an 83.7% career average through 7 seasons, which is great, to 89.97. Okay. So, how many extra free throws was that he made? Maybe a dozen a year, something like that. But they've got to have done something, either gotten close enough for somebody else to win a game for them, or Allen won a game for them, with the extra free throws. So it's easy to do, and as you point out, Dre, it's a very simple way of winning more games. So
yeah, I honestly, and actually, I'm gonna jump a shooter. I'm gonna talk DeAndre Jordan because Brian brought up an interesting point. So DeAndre Jordan is a career 45.2% free throw shooter. Last year, the Clippers went out of their way to hire someone, and I think they were going to do all sorts of stuff, and I never saw much come to fruition with it. But there was a specific program or person that was brought in to help DeAndre Jordan with his free throw shooting. Admittedly, he got better. He went up to 58% last year, but that's not amazing. You and I have talked the Wilt Chamberlain, Malcolm Gladwell podcast, where there is this belief, and I still cannot find the data, so I'm upset with this, but there's this belief that when Wilt Chamberlain was shooting underhand from free throw, it helped him be better at free throw shooting. And even if that was true, he went from like 58% career best, personal best at that point in his career to like 64%. And that's nothing, that's better, but I'm you and I both agreed that does not make you a good free throw shooter, and that does not prove that underhanded free throw shooting is the way to go. It just proves that you were shooting bad and you got a little better for one season.
Agreed.
So DeAndre Jordan, same point, 58%. That's better. Like we were saying, that's a great improvement and something we like to see. This season so far, he's at 81.5% free throw shooting. Brian was really curious about this. He said, we're going to have Art on. We have to ask him. And the funny thing is you actually have some anecdotal evidence anecdotal information that might help. And then if you have any other insight as to what you're seeing, that might make it as a thing.
Sure. Well, over the last couple of seasons, and I got to thank you for this, Trey. DeAndre would be on a nationally televised game. He'd be terrible. They'd be doing, hack a Jordan, and there'd be some kind of a tweet from Dre saying, hey, they got to get Art Rondeau in there. So first of all, thanks very much. My marketing people say thank you too. Over the last couple of seasons, I truly believe he's been close enough with his form that just handling this balance issue and basically doing an exercise a couple of minutes on game day would have been a big help. I was not able to get in to do that work, and so I can't swear that it would help, but it's helped everybody so far that I've ever worked with. So all the way, high school all the way through the NBA. So, but the funny thing is going to the Mavs. Now, I have not seen him shoot this year. I've got to watch a game and see what's going on with him. But they had that free throw coach for a couple of decades. I don't know if he's still working with them, but working with them. But the funny thing with him is he did a really great job of making good shooters shoot better. But through a couple of decades, I believe he only fixed one bad free throw shooter so it was kind of the exception that proves the rule. But and now they've hired another guy, I guess in August, he's a general shooting coach. I don't know if he's working with DeAndre on free throws, but there is a coach on the Mavericks who was a coach at a college that I did some work with, and I actually had to show this coach. I'm not naming names just because I don't know if he's actually shared this information, but because I couldn't deal directly with the player because of NCAA rules, and if you walk on the court to work with a player, you're now considered a coach, and they're coaching maxes, and there's all kinds of penalties. So I'd have to sit in the stands and watch the player, and then tell one of the coaches to go and tell the player to do with us and such. And this particular coach is now with the Mavericks, so it's very possible that that DeAndre's doing the exercise. I don't know. But that's a possibility. The
only, if I'm going to be your marketing guru or whatever, yeah. I would say it's interesting that you keep using the word like simple or easy exercise, because what I will say is it just does seem to me a number of NBA teams, and more so than just the Mavericks, right? The Mavericks are getting an edge on this now if they are using this. More teams should get people that can do this, and it's obviously not as trivial because it's there have been shooting coaches around for decades, and it is. I'm curious on this, and I'm sincerely hoping it catches on. It's very similar like the 3-point shooting in the NBA, where this was something we were banging our heads against the wall for years going, it's so obvious from the numbers, you just need to shoot more threes. And again, the analytics to the player, the convincing, because one of my favorite anecdotes is Don Nelson apparently with Steve Nash was like, just shoot more, please shoot more. And Nash said, I'm a point guard. I pass the ball. And then, of course, after Steph Curry comes along and suddenly people are like, oh, maybe if I can shoot threes, I should shoot threes. If certain teams start improving their free throw percentage, because as I noted for the talk I've mentioned a few times now, if you look at shooting across the NBA, free throw shooting has stagnated. It's basically been about 75% league average since the modern NBA.
Right.
If one team manages to take a 10% edge in that is such a huge thing. So I do hope that happens. We're almost. I don't want to spend too much time on the last two, but you were interested in the 76ers. I'm curious because you were saying mental versus physical. It does seem like what's coming out is that Markelle Fultz's free throw and shooting problems are physical. Do you have any opinion? Is that what you're seeing when you watch him? Because
I think, yeah. I'm sorry. I think it's a combination because I think something happened last year that really got into his head. Okay, but they're saying he's got shoulder issues. I've had shoulder issues. Trust me, if he's got them, that's a very big deal because it can sometimes take months or years to get over them. But there's the clip of him shooting that shot where he kind of double clutched ball faked in essence. And I think what's happening is this. He's trying to relearn how to shoot jump shots, free throws, and all that. And I would simplify things right now. If I were him, I would step back. I wouldn't be at 15 feet. I'd be back at about 16 feet. I would dribble the ball. I would take a jumper. He's working on a jumper from the floor. Let him take a jumper from the line. And the funny thing about that is Hal Greer played in Philly. Hal Greer is the last NBA player to shoot a jump shot from the line. But the advantage to that is that he's only trying to relearn one shot. Okay? And if you look at that free throw where he double clutches, you'll see he lost his balance. That's why he pulled back. Okay? So the balance issue isn't an issue if you're in the air. Okay, all these guys that have these tiny little legs and these huge upper bodies, they go flying through the air. It's not a big deal because it's when they stay on the ground. It's like us going up a ladder with a step ladder with a couple of heavy bags of groceries pressed against our chest. We go a couple of rungs up and we start to wobble. That's what these guys are built like. When they're in the air, it's no big deal. So since he's already relearning his jumper, just relearn one shot and, make your life easy. And then, they've got Dr. Joel Fish as their sports psychologist there. He's really good. They've got Townsend. I'm trying to remember his first name. They're shooting John Townsend. He's a good shooting coach. So he's got good people around him. I guess he's split with his personal coach. There was something about that. They're not even speaking now. But whatever, he needs one voice in his ear, unless the second voice is Joel Fish trying to help him, kind of clear out some of the other cobwebs. But that's very different than what I normally say to you. I mean, we've talked free throws many times, not on your podcast, and I don't normally say this, but I would say, you don't get style points. He doesn't. If he makes a perfect form book free throw or he takes one and misses, he doesn't get half a point because he looked good. So let him take the jumper and just concentrate on getting one shot that he's good with. And if he's taking the jumper from the line, he's taking the jumper from the floor, eventually that's going to be sinking on a regular basis. And then, he can start looking at specialty shots, if you will. So that's my take.
We got some judging like in figure skating, guys. So, we do
that's
make
right.
sure the form is perfect.
That's
all right.
True.
Did you okay? And this one, I mean, he's getting like I'd call it like the Wilt Chamberlain Award. Ben Simmons, he's regressed a little, though he's still one of the top point guards in the league. In that, if you've got a point guard that's great at assist to turnover ratio, that can rebound and guard big, that's a huge steal about Ben Simmons, is that you are essentially. It's kind of cheating. It's almost like a designated hitter in baseball. You are getting one more, in this case, not offensive, defensive. You're getting one more defensive weapon for free at a small position. Unfortunately, despite the fact that he has a 54% effective field goal percentage, which is pretty good, his true shooting percentage is only 56.7 because his free throw rate has improved from last year, but it's only 60%. So do you have any thoughts on Ben Simmons? You specifically said you wanted to talk on the script.
Yeah, well, actually, there are two things with that, because I watched him a lot last season. And again, and I hate to say it because it sounds, but the balance thing is such an across-the-board issue. That'll be a big fix for him. But here's an example of what goes on that can mess up somebody mentally. Somebody noted that he was shooting something like 80% from the line at home and like 20% from the line on the road. So the next home game, he ended up going like 0 for 8 because they got into his head about when he was doing well, and now he's thinking more about it, So that just kind of, jumped up as something that cracked me up.
Want a remarkable split that we should not, to your exact point, we don't want to screw him up at home. His free throw shooting on the road is worse than at home. It's 56.4% on the road, 66.7% at home. But his true shooting percentage, he's 57.1% on the road, 56.2 at home. So he is using the Brian magnitude test. He is more effective on the road than at home on offense, at least when it comes to shooting.
Wow. Okay. It's good to know.
Okay, so that was the first point you were saying. Some people are getting in his head about small things like that.
Yep. And then I think just the other piece really just came down to I am such a proponent of doing this little exercise because it is if you keep people from losing their balance, their bodies do not autocorrect, I call it, basically. When they don't autocorrect, they don't do things. The body doesn't do things biomechanically that messes up the shot. So that's it.
What's fascinating from your point, I think we've said this kind of implicitly among a lot of the interviews on the show. I'll let this wrap us up and then we can take the show out. But it is almost as if you are saying, and I'm going to put words in your mouth and then see if you agree, that there is a fundamental flaw in how free throw shooting is taught and done in the NBA, which to me is remarkable because I can't think of an analog where I can't think of any sport where you could say that an entire league was doing something that was very trivial to that league wrong for a very long time and then change it. Because even with Moneyball, they were basically making incremental changes to things that people were good at and that we recognize, right? The good hitters, the Babe Ruths, the Hank Aaron's, we recognized as good hitters. It was just not recognizing kind of the people in the middle Whereas you're almost saying, and we've talked about LeBron James, the greatest player in the last decade and a half, talking Ben Simmons, probably the greatest rookie since Tim Duncan, in terms of being a good player on a good team. Right. And also one of the top up-and-coming talents. You're talking Markelle Fultz, one of the top prospects. It's like we are talking about elite players in the NBA. DeAndre Jordan is a player we've mentioned as an MVP candidate, according to the geeky analytics people that will never be listened to. And when DeAndre Jordan gets more than one MVP vote is the same as when the Cy Young winner was able to go to pitchers with losing records. So, and that took hundreds of years, and that took over 100 years in baseball. So I'm not holding my breath in it happening in the NBA and under 100 years. So all that stuff, I can't think of any other analog, but is that what you're saying, that free throw shooting in the NBA is fundamentally flawed at some level?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, I mean, I discovered this whole balance exercise. I developed the exercise to fix the balance issue. I came up with that when I was 16. And it was through a whole bunch of flukes. And I just figured, hey, if a 16-year-old can figure this out, obviously the NBA already knows it. And it wasn't until years later I'm watching Greg Kite brick him from the foul line for the Celtics. I'm going, they don't know, and so I started following up. Well, there's a big problem. First of all, everybody says free throw shooting is easy. Everybody says it's easy, even though there is so much evidence that shows that it's not.
Yeah, if you're going by the analytics nerds, what we would say is, holy cow, teams have gotten much better at handling the ball over the years. Their assist to turnover ratio shows it. Holy cow, they've gotten way better at rebounding. The rebounding percentage numbers show this. Of course, they've gotten better at shooting from the field. I keep bringing this up. The reason Donovan Mitchell, when people compare him to Kobe Bryant, falls flat is there's been inflation. Kobe Bryant's number, this is a remarkable thing to point out. Kobe Bryant's MVP numbers, which we would have agreed with, we wouldn't have given him the MVP, but we would have given him an MVP vote, if that's fair. Those numbers in the modern NBA are outdated. They're not worth the same, and the same thing happens in other sports. All of those, we say that about so many things in the NBA, but then when we get to free throws, I go, there's been no improvement on free throws.
Right.
Outside of noise, right? The Nate Silver plus or minus two house seats or whatever, right? That is the change. It's basically this change in free throw percentage over the years is noise.
Right. And what ends up happening, because it's, quote, easy, free throw shooting is easy, coaches think that it's a sign of weakness if they say, hey, I'm not getting this right. I'm going to bring in, somebody and listen to some new stuff. Everybody goes and changes release. Okay. It's the very last thing you should do, because you got a guy at the line. Free throw is different than a jump shot for a whole bunch of things, speed of the ball, angle of entry, height of release. I mean, everybody says, oh, they're the same shot, except for these 25 different things. And so the only thing that the player's got that is really working for him is his release, because he's doing it because he's comfortable. And so the very first thing we do is say, we're going to get rid of that and now make you totally uncomfortable. But I have actually had coaches that I've offered to show this information to, and they're insulted. They think that I am insulting their intelligence and saying they're bad shooting coaches, and so they don't want to hear it. And then I'll watch and see somebody loses a game, a crucial game, because they're shooting 50% from the line. And so part of it is accepting that maybe there's something out there that is outside my purview of, my knowledge of the sport. I'm good at it, but maybe somebody knows something more. And the other thing is just this whole, it's, everybody says it's easy, so therefore it's easy. And so that's where I think we've got to bridge that gap for free throws, like we're bridging it in other areas. So anyway. And
so fans of the show have known I've been banging this drum, but I'm gonna keep doing it, because as an analytics person, this is how we first met. It has driven me crazy to just look at this and go, this of all of the improvements, this makes no sense. So listeners of the Boxscore Geeks show, if you are able to get your NBA team to freaking do something about free throws, I'll stop talking about it. Until then, though, Art, that means you have a regular spot on the show as long as you want it. I'm going to let that be our show, but I do have a shout out that relates to the topic. I was going to make it a full subject, but I figured just with how much we were talking psychology, this is an easy shout out. If you've got a shout out, Brian, I'll let you get that, and then we'll give Art your credentials and then head out. The World Chess Championship is going on, and Fabiano Corona, I think I said that wrong. I apologize. I've just been messing up international.
Been hearing
names.
Caruana lately.
Anna, thank you. I'm so glad you're here, Brian, because I hate messing up names, but then I try and go a million miles an hour, and I do it. He had, according to the chess engines, almost a pawn and a half edge after playing c5 in the last game of the World Chess Championship, but through 8 games has been draws. I don't know if there was a game today. If there was, I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't around today. But through 8 games, it was all draws, and he had this huge edge. And one of the best U.S. chess players, number 6 in the world, Hikaru Nakamura, was watching the game, and Fabiano, basically, they were watching the game, and they're like, c5 is the move. c5 is such a huge move. If he takes c5, he's got the initiative, he's got the edge. Fabiano took 40 minutes thinking about this move that the engine, after 10 minutes, which, I mean, admittedly, it's an AI computer, so that's not a human, said it was the best move. You had the second best U.S. chess player, I believe, watching the game, saying it was the best move. And the second best chess player in the world, an inch from being the best chess player in the world, made it, but he spent 40 minutes thinking about it. And then basically he kind of blundered later because he played a defensive move, which lost the initiative, and the game ended up being a draw. Mm-hmm. So it's funny because as I was watching this, so to your point, Art, Nakamura said, the longer he thinks about it, the less likely he is to make the move. He did make the move, but then he didn't follow up on it. And he said he's getting in his own head because, when you play blitz or speed chess, there's a very intuitive, obvious move that you make. And if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. But when you're on the world stage and you're worried and you overthink yourself and you talk yourself out of it. And he basically said, if you are the best chess player in the world and you spend too much time thinking, you talk yourself out of good ideas because you start second guessing yourself. And that, to all of the subjects we're just talking about, the World Chess Championship stayed appropriate because that happened to the greatest U.S. chess player since Bobby Fischer just this last week. He got in his own head and blundered a potential winning game in the World Chess Championship.
Excellent point.
All right. Do you have any? I'll let you get the capper, Brian.
No, I've got no shouts. Just thanks to both of you guys for being on the show tonight, and happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, yeah. Happy Thanksgiving. So
happy Thanksgiving to you, too. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
And we've got Art Rondeau. If you don't follow him on Twitter, you should. Just it's Art, and then Rondeau is spelled Rondeau. We'll probably link to the couple of the articles you said on your blog, Art, which is I always mess up the title because it's like really long about the
game time at the Garden of Good and Evil. that would be Madison Square Garden. So.
And then anything else, any other sites or anything else you're doing that you want to plug before we head out?
That's it. Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yeah,
I always enjoy talking with you guys.
We love it too. Thanks so much for being on. 76ers, you have no excuse, so fix it up. All right, that's been the show. If you find us not through the website, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. I've been your host, Ray Alvarez. You can find me everywhere as Nerd Numbers. Co-host Brian Foster, you can find as Boxscore Brian. We go live we went Tuesday this week for scheduling, but twitch.tv/Nerd Numbers. When we finally got a regular enough schedule, I'll start hammering that out. But if you follow us on Twitch, then when we go live, you can see us. Recaps of the show, channel Nerd Numbers on YouTube, and you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher, the Boxscore Geek Show. Have a good week, and hope your team wins.